Meeting number 27 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans. Today's meeting, of course, has taken place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of Monday, January 25th, 2021, and therefore members can attend in person in the room or remotely using the Zoom application. The committee is considering committee business and future business, and with respect to the routine motion adopted by the committee, the meeting is, of course, in public. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website, so you are aware the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. Mr. Batiste, you have your hand raised.
Yes, I believe the last time we had met, we were talking about the motion that I had put forth, and we ran out of time, and that was to start off with the prawn study, extending the Pacific salmon study, and then going into Mr. Morrissey's motion on, can you hear me?
I missed part of that, Mr. Batiste, due to, I don't know, it's bad connection or what. Could you go through it again for me, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I think at the end of last meeting, we were talking about, I had put a motion on the floor and we ran out of time. The motion was to move forward on the prawn study and then to extend the Pacific salmon study, as well as getting to Mr. Morrissey's motion on the owner-operator and inshore sales. So I'm willing to move that forward as the next three studies if there's support.
Okay, so you're moving that in the form of a motion, or?
Yes.
Okay, discussions. Madame Gill.
I think Mr. Bragdon raised his hand before myself.
Okay. Mr. Bragdon, you've been shoved up the line.
Oh, I'm fine either way. Madam Gill would be welcome to go if she wants, but I'm actually just in regards to what Mr. Batiste has brought forward, just a couple of questions in regards to, I think, trying to complete one study, then move into the next, followed by the next. I'm wondering if it's possible, and again, I'd just like to seek clarity around this as it pertains to the current study that we're on, which is the Pacific salmon study and the West Coast salmon study. I believe Mr. Hardy brought in a motion about extending it, but in reflecting upon that and thinking about it, I'm wondering if it's possible that we finish up the West Coast Pacific salmon study first, if at all possible, then move directly to, either the prawn harvester issue or the Mr. Morrissey's motion and study as it relates to the owner operator study. I think just to give us finality, because I know that this West Coast study is very important, but it's been going for quite some time. It would be nice to move that towards a conclusion, and perhaps we'll be able to do that in even less than 3 future sessions. I want to put that on the floor to consider before we start to interrupt this study with another study and go to another one. Perhaps we try and wrap up one before we go into the others. Just a suggestion.
Thank you, Mr. Bragdon. Before I go to Mr. Hardy or back to Madam Gill, Tina, some staff are telling me they're trying to get into the meeting and haven't been let in. Could that please be done, please? Thank you. Madam Gill.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to speak to the motion. I agree with Mr. Bragdon that the study on Pacific salmon should conclude. We've been working on this for quite a while. During the last meeting, we also spoke about the budget, so the question of how to spend, and we were looking at increasing the amount of meetings dealing with this. We could do a report and then go to something else, but I would have liked, I know that the calendar is quite tight. There's a lot of studies, important studies underway, but I'm the only MP for Quebec, and I've tabled some motions. And of course, I understand we're talking about the Atlantic and Pacific. I have a study that's very short on the issue of the recreational fishery that looks at the perspective of economic recovery. This is something we hear about a lot. I would have liked to talk about this. I believe that the calendar does allow for this between now and the end of June. And if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Chair, we also talked about the possibility of continuing in the summer. I've heard this, and I don't know if this is still in the cards or not. We did that last year. So I would like for the committee to take this into account and maybe to slip in a very, very short study between the different studies. I think it would be a good thing to do because I would like to deal with this issue of Quebec, and it could be beneficial for other regions. I think that it had been brought into the Atlantic as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Gill. We'll now go to Mr. Hardy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the interest in the group of getting that Pacific salmon study done. It's been off and on now for literally months as we've dealt with, clearly important things. We added meetings simply because the advent of the 2021 budget announced $647 million to be invested in dealing with the situation on the West Coast. Now, in terms of the timing, we have time to get those additional meetings in, but I would want to defer to the clerk or whoever to see, in fact, how quickly we can get the witnesses in place to basically go forward with those additional salmon study meetings, or whether or not we could, in fact, work in 2 meetings on the prawn issue if in fact those witnesses aren't available to us for next week.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. Mr. Arnold.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate everybody's enthusiasm in this committee for covering so many topics, but we're talking about squeezing in more studies and more meetings. We haven't even covered off the studies that were approved by the entire group months ago. The IUU study on illegal, unreported, and unregulated fisheries, the Pinniped or seal management study put forward by Mr. Morrissey, Madam Gill's motion to study the potential of recreational fisheries in Quebec. Are we discarding all of those other motions? We really only have a few meetings left, possibly 13 and possibly even less than that, depending on when the House rises. I really think we need to be considerate here. The Pacific salmon study, as others have mentioned, has been going on for months. I believe it's extremely important that we've heard so much testimony in that, and that's been such a long study. It's going to take us, I think, a reasonable amount of time to look at the report for what should be in there for recommendations, and then go through the review of the draft reports to try and fit anything else in now. There really isn't time. So I would prefer that we focus on the Pacific salmon study as a priority overall right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. And all I will say to that and the discussion that has taken place up to this point is we want this today set aside to actually discuss future business. And that's where we're to. And if somebody makes a motion to do such and such, we have to deal with it as we're doing here now. I'm not suggesting in any way which study should be done next or which one should be completed, but it was the committee members who asked to have committee business so as we could discuss what we have left in a time frame and what we can do in that time frame. And that's exactly what I expect to be done today. So any other discussion on Mr. Battiste's motion? Mr. Arnold, you got your hand up. You're on mute.
Then I would like to offer an amendment to Mr. Battiste's motion that the and in some way identify the Pacific salmon study as the first priority to get done. If we can get through the witness testimony on this, then we could have time to draft a report and study that report. That would be my recommendation, an amendment to the motion to prioritize the Pacific salmon study.
Okay, we've heard the amendment, the proposed amendment. Any discussion? Mr. Johns.
So can I, just for clarity's sake, it's to finish the salmon study and then do the prawns? Is that the amendment, Mr. Arnold?
I didn't identify what was next. I just identified the salmon study as a priority.
Yeah, and it was presented as amendment, Mr. Johns, to Mr. Battiste's motion of doing the prawn study next. And this is an amendment to finish up the salmon part of it, study, to get that done first before, and so we can vote on the amendment when the discussion ends, and then we'll vote on the motion as amended if it goes through. Mr. Morrissey.
Mr. Chair, I believe the motion, Mr. Battiste prioritized three studies or reports. The salmon one would be the priority, but it's my understanding there was probably an issue with scheduling additional witnesses that may leave a day or two earlier, at which time that's why the prawn study would move into that time slot. I don't think anybody, I believe most of the committee would agree we'd like to wrap up the salmon study as quickly as possible. So I assume it's a priority with the committee, but it's my understanding from the clerks that there was an issue of confirming the witness's ability to communicate effectively with the committee, and that could create a day or two or some meeting time that would be available, at which time we would move with prawns. That's my understanding.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Morrissey. Madam Gill.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are two elements. Number one, with the calendar, can we situate ourselves? Can we see where we will be at the end of this study? And then, when the report will be written up, as my colleague Mr. Arnold is saying, if we don't have any room at the end of the calendar, I don't see why we would prioritize other studies if we don't have any, if we run out of time. I spoke about the idea of looking at having committee meetings in the summer. There are some really important issues, such as the prawns. I would be in agreement, but at least we should have an idea of where we're going. And I would like to reiterate, well, I'd like to hear my colleagues speak to studies with regards to Quebec, because I don't hear anything on this. We're trying to be have parity between men and women. We want everyone to be represented, but here I don't feel represented, even if I understand there can be emergencies, but also everything is relative. So thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if, well, we can look at the scope of the work to be done to situate ourselves between now and the middle or the end of June.
Thank you, Madam Gill. And I know twice now you've raised the issue of meetings in the summer, because we did do it last summer, but I think that was an agreement with the whips at the time because of the House kind of getting, like the rest of Canada, getting turned upside down in March. And there wasn't much that took place for a certain length of time, and we were just trying to catch up as we went with a number of meetings throughout the summer. So I don't know. That's not for the committee to decide right now. I guess the whips will discuss that amongst the various parties and see what they want to do with this summer, if it's going to be any different. Mr. Bragdon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And look, it could be a bit of a question. We're saying that the holdup on the Pacific salmon study could be, the arranging of witnesses. Say there's a 7-day period between now and next Wednesday. Tentatively, we could look at that one for, further on the West Coast and Pacific salmon study. And I'm wondering if something within the department as it relates to the budgetary aspect of the Pacific salmon study could be arranged for Monday's meeting, and whereas it's within the department, and I think that's something that should be considered, and we could cover quite a bit of ground, and again, be focused on the Pacific salmon study and keep moving the ball down the court to get as much of this done within a timely fashion as possible. Just raise that as a possibility.
Thank you, Mr. Bragdon. But I think right now we're dealing with the amendment by Mr. Arnold, and seeing no other, Mr. Mazier.
It's just to be clear, what the amendment is just to make it a priority, but to clean it up and to complete it. So that's the amendment right now. Yeah. So
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. That's what I understand as the amendment to Mr. Batiste's original motion. So if there's no other interventions on the amendment, Tina, could we go to a vote, please?
The amendment of Mr. Arnold, Mr. Batiste,
I vote against.
Mr. Beach,
I vote against.
Monsieur Cormier,
Contre.
Mr. Hardy,
I vote against.
Mr. Morrissey,
Against.
Mr. Arnold,
In favor.
Mr. Bragdon,
In favor.
Mr. Calkins,
In favor.
Mr. Mazier,
In favor.
Madame Gill,
En faveur.
Mr. Johns,
Against.
Yeas pour, 5, 5, nays contre, 6.
Sorry. So the amendment is voted down. So now we'll go back to the original motion by Mr. Batiste. Is there any further discussion? Seeing no hands up. Tina, when you're ready, could you go to a vote, please? And maybe just for clarity, could you read out the proposed motion by Mr. Batiste, please?
I don't have it in writing.
Or maybe Mr. Batiste could read it out once again.
That we get to the prawn study next, and then finish off the Pacific salmon study, and then go into Mr. Morrissey's motion on the transfer and sales. I think that he has the wording better than I do.
Okay, but I think we get the message. Thank you, Mr. Batiste, for that. So Tina, if you could do the recorded vote, please.
Thank you. Mr. Batiste,
In favor.
Mr. Beach,
In favor.
Monsieur Cormier,
For.
Mr. Hardy,
In favor.
Mr. Morrissey,
In favor.
Mr. Arnold,
Opposed.
Mr. Bragdon,
Opposed.
Mr. Calkins,
Opposed.
Mr. Mazier,
Opposed.
Madame Gill,
Contre.
Mr. Johns,
In favor.
Yeas pour, 6, nays contre, 5. Mr. Chair, you're on mute.
Yeah, doing that all day. Uh, now that this motion is carried, we should look at a deadline for witnesses. If we're doing the prawn study, which was put forward by Mr. Johns first, we don't have a lot of time before our next meeting, and I don't know if it was the intent to bring officials in first, and they may be readily available because they are probably in Ottawa. Mr. Johns, do you have any thoughts on that since that was your motion?
I mean, we've got witnesses that we can contact right away. It's about getting the headsets to them and whatnot. So.
Yeah, and that's why, Mr. Johns, I mentioned if the officials are to come, they could probably come. They may already have headsets, any that are not in Ottawa. And
oh, sure, that would be fine. We'd be fine with that.
Because our next meeting is Monday. If we have to mail out headsets, say, for example, if we were to start salmon first, we may not be guaranteed that we will get the headsets to the people in time, and we'd be wasting a meeting allocation that could have did something else. So if we could maybe do the officials for Monday for the prawn, if they're available. And if not, we still need to have a deadline for the presentation of witnesses. Mr. Johnson, I know it was your motion, and do you want to suggest a date that would give the clerks time to get something moving sooner rather than later?
Yeah, end of Friday would be fine for us. It's just up to whether that works for the other parties.
Okay, Tina, does the end of Friday, or say 4 p.m. Friday Eastern time, does that work for you, for the witnesses for the prawn study?
I would need some names by tomorrow morning at noon at the latest, in order to make that work for Monday, if that's possible.
Okay, we mentioned Monday as being the officials.
Not all names, just a few tomorrow morning that can be quickly set up. We don't know about the officials, as long as it's if there's some that in advance that can be set up quickly, then that works. We can start as early as tomorrow. After that, for that study, the others we can do after. We get them on Friday, that's fine. But tomorrow morning, we definitely need to have a few.
Well, I think I see Mr. John shaking his head when you said we need to have some for tomorrow morning. So I think that won't be a problem. But then, and also we can work on the officials as well for at least Monday.
Mr. Chair, sorry to cut everybody off. Am I the only one having a connection problem? Like it's cutting a lot. Like I'm always like having you guys are all talking and then it's cutting off for 2 or 3 seconds and then it's going back. Am I the only one experiencing that, or?
Yeah, I'm not experiencing it on my end, Mr. Cormier. Maybe just your internet connection of where you're to, or where you're at, depending which part of the country you're in. You'd say where you to, where you at.
Yeah, I never experienced that before, but I'll keep on and I'll check with IT if it's still doing it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, I don't know if Mr. Arnold had his hand up first or if Mr. Morrissey did. We'll go to you, Mr. Arnold. Okay, he's not listening.
You've frozen, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Arnold.
Oh, thank you. Everything froze for a minute here as well.
Yeah, it did.
Okay. Yeah, I just would like to seek some clarification on how many meetings we're actually going to be able to have for witnesses on this, and then what is going to be the end result, the report, and so on. How many witnesses might we have space for, so that we know how many to line up.
Okay, I understand, Mr. Arnold, that it was for 2 meetings. And I'd have to go back to Mr. Johns to see if it was his intent to have a report adopted by the committee and presented in the House, or if it was just for information purposes only, or a letter or whatever. Mr. Johns, could you enlighten us?
Yeah, thanks. I do hope that there would be a short report back to the House. I mean, it's 2 meetings, so it shouldn't be very long. And we would want the department to obviously appear and testify, but it shouldn't be that difficult. I mean, I imagine it should be pretty straightforward.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Morrissey.
Mr. Chair, possibly Mr. Johns could indicate which department officials. I'm not familiar with this issue, so if we were supporting or submitting witnesses, I take it there would be people in the department that would be specialized in this. So I'd be curious to hear from Mr. Johns on what department officials he thinks would be beneficial to the committee.
Yeah, I think that I'm certainly Rebecca Reed would be able to identify who in her department she'd like to, put forward. Imagine anyone who's in charge of who's reinterpreting these rules should be testifying in front of us so that we can ask them what they're doing and why they're doing it, and pose questions to them about what the ramifications are in their process and whatnot. And sure, we can all come up with some questions about whether they've explored the impact this is going to have on the industry.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. Mr. Batiste.
Yes, I'm wondering if Gord would be open to, instead of a study, since it's a two meeting on the prawns, if a letter would suffice in terms of getting something back to the House.
Yeah, I would be open to that. I'd love to hear what my colleagues, other colleagues would like to say about that. Mr. Arnold maybe has a comment on that.
Okay, Mr. Bragdon.
Yeah, idea for witness two, we probably should hear from CFIA as well in regards to this. And I think they would have pertinent testimony relating to this.
Thank you. It's probably, I don't know if the clerk made a note of it at that time. If not, Mr. Bragdon, would be a suggestion to submit that to the clerk at your earliest possible convenience so as they would have it. Mr. Arnold.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, as far as department, I believe we need to hear from the decision makers as well as the enforcement personnel, because it's the enforcement personnel that need to enact what is taking place. So that's just just offering that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. So seeing nothing else, and I know somebody mentioned just now about what's coming up. So am I to take it that our next two meetings will be dedicated to the prawn study, or will we start with the prawn study, go back and finish Pacific salmon, and then come back to the finish up of the prawn study? Nancy, Tina, have we still got witnesses on our list that we haven't contacted for the actual salmon study, or?
Maybe I will answer this one, Mr. Chair, since I was the one in charge of the list back in the time. There are a little bit of witnesses that we can go down the list for the salmon. Either the list submitted last fall, not a lot, and some if we go back in time, if we use the list from the 43.
Un appel au règlement, Monsieur le Président. L'interprète.
The interpreter is saying that it's hard to interpret because there's an issue with the sound. Thank you.
Pardon, je vais me rapprocher. Est-ce que c'est mieux maintenant? Est-ce que les
Is this better? Can the interpreters hear? Her sound is very low. I'm in charge of the witness list, and so I will answer. There's a few witnesses left over from the fall list, and a few left over if we look at the witness list from 43-1. It's the same study, so if I've understood correctly, for the salmon study, there are two microphones open, says the interpreter.
Est-ce que je me trompe?
Am I mistaken?
Okay. Mr. Arnold.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I forgot to lower my hand after the last intervention.
Oh, okay, sorry. Mr. Johns.
Okay, so just a couple of things to clarify. Maybe first, back to the prawn study, a letter would be fine. So as long as we can include recommendations to the House and to the Minister. And on the salmon, Nancy, would you be open to, because we're extending those 3 meetings purely for budget, we might want to bring some witnesses back. Is there a deadline on when we can resubmit those names? Because this is about the money that Mr. Hardy's put forward, those 3 meetings. So are we saying that there's 3 meetings for the money to talk about the 647 million? And is there another meeting that we're looking at previous witnesses left of the original salmon study? Or are we done? Are we done with the study and now we're just looking at the 647 million? So trying to figure this out, because there's 2 different things. If we've got names left over and we're bringing them back to talk about the 647 million, I don't know if that's everybody's priority. Like, I certainly know from our priority, we're going to be wanting to bring back stakeholders that can talk about the money. And some of them have already appeared before the committee, but we're going to want to bring them back.
Okay, Mr. Johns, do you want to possibly set a deadline for the proposal of witnesses to the clerk to be able to contact them to come back for the salmon study? Whether it's a repeat of a witness or whether it's a new witness.
That would be great. So I just clarify though, Mr. Chair, is that we have 3 meetings left on salmon and no matter what, or is there 1 left of the original and we have 3 more on the money, or is it we're just going to the money, the next 3? I can see Mr. Beach is pointing 3, so I imagine that's okay. So I propose that we have some time, maybe till Friday, to get names for the money in terms of our witnesses, at least to the clerk, if everybody agrees to that. And
okay, could we say noon on Friday?
Okay. Fine for us.
Okay, deadline for additional or repeat witnesses to finish off the salmon study is noon Eastern this Friday, which is April 30th, of course, the end of the month. Mr. Morrissey, you got your hand up.
Mr. Chair, you may have clarified it, but we can submit new names. I had a list that I had forwarded to the clerk. They would be new. They were not on the old list, so we can consider those as well on the Friday deadline. Am I clear?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, so that starts, in other words, we'll start Monday on prawn, then we'll move to the Pacific salmon for the 3 meetings, and which will bring us up to the 12th of May. And then on the 25th, we'll do our second meeting on 26th. I'm sorry, I haven't got reading glasses on. The 26th, the Wednesday, we will do the second day of the prawn study. And then I would probably suggest, if we want to get the draft report for salmon started on the 31st of May. And that brings us up to June. The 2nd would be our next meeting. Are we going to do the corporate licenses study as per Mr. Batiste's motion on that particular day? Start corporate licenses study on June 2nd. Okay, I see Mr. Morrissey giving a thumbs up for that. So we'll have we got lots of time to submit witnesses for that as we go forward. That would leave us Monday, June 7th to do draft report for Pacific salmon. And that brings us up. Feel free to interrupt at any time, please. That would bring us then to the 9th, which would be second of the last meeting, I guess, dedicated to corporate licenses, because I think that was left at 2 particular meetings. Mr. Bragdon, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question in regards to the budget aspect and as it relates to the Pacific salmon study. As one of the witnesses, and I want to be sure if adequate notice is given in time, but I feel it would be very much appropriate, whereas this is pertaining to the budget, that we request the minister appear before this committee pertaining to that and be able to answer questions and be able to speak to the committee regarding the budget. towards Pacific salmon. So if I need to make that a formal request or a motion, I just think it would be only appropriate to have the minister appear before the committee to speak to the budget.
Yeah, well, I think, Mr. Bragdon, it'd probably be more appropriate, or for sake of a better word, carry a little bit more weight, is if you actually said that was a motion to have the minister appear and the budget for Pacific salmon.
Also move, if that's okay, Mr. Chair. I so move the request that the minister appear before the committee to speak to the budget as it relates to the Pacific salmon study.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bragdon. Just to make it official.
Okay.
We've heard the motion. Any intervention? Oh, I see Mr. Michael, the analyst, had his hand up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I didn't want to preempt any other member, but I just wanted to raise that if we get drafting instructions for Pacific salmon on May 31st, that wouldn't give us enough time to have a report ready for June the 7th, because we would need at least, at a very minimum, a week and a half for drafting and a week and a half for translation. So just wanted to flag that.
Okay, thank you. That part we don't have to straighten out just yet, I don't think. Mr. Arnold.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would second the motion from Mr. Bragdon and actually further refine the motion that the minister appear for 1 2-hour meeting to discuss the budget and measures as it contains for Pacific salmon.
Okay, I'll consider that an amendment to the motion. I don't think there's any such thing as a motion being seconded at committee. Members just make the motion and we deal with it, but you can certainly amend it. Mr. Batiste.
It's my understanding that the minister will be coming in to discuss the supplementaries anyway. Does that not give us time to ask her those questions instead of asking her to come back twice? That takes away from our time with being able to hear from witnesses and conclude studies. I see the clerk's hand up, so maybe I'm wrong on this. So just
no, I'm sorry. The bells
Tina.
are ringing, Mr. Chair.
Okay, the bells. So they just started? Are they
Yes.
30-minute bells?
Yes.
Okay, could I get unanimous consent to carry on for 15 minutes? That would give everybody time to sign out and sign in. I see no objections. Thank you, Mr. Batiste, for that. And yeah, okay, we're dealing with Mr. Arnold's amendment first. Mr. Gore-Johns, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think the minister, whether she's coming for budget supplement or not, that we need to speak to her separately on that overall. And I think we need her just on salmon. I mean, just because it's only 2 hours we're asking for, specifically on the salmon. We have, it's going to take 2 hours to ask her. $647 million, a lot of money, and it's very critical to the West Coast.
Well, I guess if the minister appears, it's up to the members what questions they ask her while the minister is there, or any minister for that matter. So seeing no further intervention, can we vote on the amendment to Mr. Bragdon's motion, please?
Thank you. The amendment of Mr. Arnold. Mr. Batiste?
Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I have my hand up. Point of order.
I don't believe you can do a point of order on a vote, can you?
Well, I had my hand up before the vote was called, but it wasn't acknowledged.
Okay. I'm sorry.
I just wanted the main motion and the amendment to be reread, please.
The main motion to be reread, or the amendment, or both?
Both. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Arnold, could you read your amendment, please?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. The amendment would be that the committee invite the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans to appear for 1 2-hour meeting to discuss Budget 2021, including measures it contains for Pacific salmon.
Okay, we've heard the amendment. Mr. Bragdon, would you read the original motion, please?
That we request the Minister of Fisheries, Oceans, and Canadian Coast Guard to appear before the committee regarding the Pacific salmon study and the budget pertaining to it.
Thank you, Mr. Bragdon. Now we'll go to the vote on the amendment, please.
Thank you. Mr. Batiste,
In favor.
Mr. Beach,
In favor.
Monsieur Cormier,
In favor.
Mr. Hardy,
In favor.
Mr. Morrissey,
In favor.
Mr. Arnold,
In favor, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Bragdon,
In favor.
Mr. Calkins,
In favor.
Mr. Mazier,
In favor.
Madame Gill,
En faveur.
Mr. Johns.
In favor.
Yeas pour 11-11.
Okay, so the amendment to the motion is passed. Tina, if we could do a vote now on the motion as amended.
Thank you. Motion is amended. Mr. Batiste,
In favor.
Mr. Beach,
In favor.
Monsieur Cormier,
For.
Mr. Hardy,
In favor.
Mr. Morrissey,
In favor.
Mr. Arnold,
In favor.
Mr. Bragdon,
In favor.
Mr. Calkins,
In favor.
Mr. Mazier,
In favor.
Madame Gill,
En faveur.
Mr. Johns.
In favor.
Yeas pour 11-11. Mr. Chair, you're on mute.
Sorry again. So the motion as amended is passed. We'll now have a look at continuing on with, or I think maybe we'll say that's enough with regard to the schedule. We've got two things on our plate, and as we go forward, we'll carve off a little bit of time for committee business when we see where we're to at that particular time. We won't schedule anything beyond what we've got done here now today. Okay, anybody have any other committee business before we all rush away to the vote? Madam Gill, you got your hand up.
Oops. Oui, Monsieur le Président.
Yes, I was saying, well, given that there are many studies and there's a report, I imagine then we'll come back on this report on salmon, and you've left some blank spaces in the calendar for the end of June. So it would be possible to end this for the end of June?
L'étude.
I would like to make sure that the salmon study will be completed for the well-being of salmon so that it doesn't disappear before the end of the study. Thank you.
I think that's the intent. I think that's the intent of all the motions that have been made, including back to Mr. Batiste's motion and as well to Mr. Bragdon's motion. And I think it's fully the intent of the committee to make sure we get this finished and the report done and presented in the House before the House rises, whenever that might be, if it's in June or if it's beyond that. So, Mr. Arnold, you get your hand up again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the analyst indicated the time needed for drafting of the report. I would request that if needed, that we look at possibly fitting in an additional or extraordinary meeting in the week of May the 10th to provide drafting instructions in that week so that a version 1 could be ready in time for us to consider.
Okay, would it be, before I go to Mr. Bragdon, would it be easier to try and do drafting instructions at the end of the third meeting on the Pacific salmon?
Will depend, I guess, on what we feel we need for time for drafting instructions. I'm just suggesting it may be beneficial to add some time into that week to make sure that we get the instructions to the analyst by that time. And before I forget, could I also ask the clerk to send out clarity on what the deadlines are now for the additional or revised witness list for the salmon study and for the prawn study, so that we're very clear on when those deadlines are?
Okay, I thought the prawn study was tomorrow at 12, and I thought the Pacific salmon study was Friday at 12. So if that clarifies that part of it for you. And with regards to looking at extra time, we can do that along the way. But right now, I'd like to just suggest, because usually drafting instructions don't take very long, so I don't think we need to allocate a full meeting to drafting instructions. So we'll try and look at the 12th when we finish up the study, and we'll know going forward once we figure out how the witnesses are being scheduled and filled in. Some may not be available, and maybe we'll get enough witnesses for the 2 meetings, including the one with the minister, and another half a meeting might do it, and then we can dedicate half a meeting to the actual drafting instructions. But I think we'll leave that at the chair's discretion, might be the easiest way to say it, and with the full intent of making sure we get time to do it, so as we can make sure the study is done and completed before the House rises. Mr. Bragdon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick thing, just a request, wondering if we could have the clerk send to each of the members an updated calendar of everything that we've discussed here today, just so we have it and everybody's on the same page and we're good to go.
Yep, I see Tina is nodding her head, so I'm sure that will be looked after. Barring nothing else, can I suggest now we go to the vote and see what time is left over afterwards, if we want to come back to committee or if we'll have time? Is it everyone's intent to try and come back? So as the clerk would know, I see some people shaking heads no. So, okay, I'm not hearing any disagreement with that. So we will, Mr. Arnold, you had your hand up and down. Oh, it's up again.
No, I'm just curious. Just curious as to how much time we have left. I'll leave that to you, sir.
Okay, we've had about close to an hour, and so we'll adjourn for. Oh, Mr. Batista, his hand up.
I was just putting my hand up in support of. I think we've covered off what we needed to cover today, and after the vote, we should just adjourn, or we should just adjourn
Understood.
and then go vote.
Well, if you look at the time, that there's still probably 10, close to 15 minutes, I think, for the vote to be called. Then it's another 10 minutes. So our time, and then by the time the vote takes and the count is, there's not going to be much left anyway. So I think I'll take Mr. Battiste's advice, and I will adjourn the meeting for now. And if I don't give everyone a notice that we're coming back, we'll see you all at the next committee meeting. Adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Chair.